Welcome, I'm Kinetic Symphony. This is Dave. I hunt down and report on weird and true mysterious stories, from glitches to the supernatural. Case file number 1680, written by Master Trader. A dreamer's nightmares clash with reality. When I was in my preteens, I started to have dreams of things that would happen later in real life. The order and colors of cars at an intersection, new billboards on the main road, a sentence or three spoken later in the week. Very ordinary things that, after a year or so of this happening at least once a month, I largely ignored and accepted them as commonplace occurrences that quite a few people have. In my mid-teens, 14 or 15, I started to have extremely vivid dreams where I had no recollection of myself or anyone I knew in any way whatsoever. Some of them seeming to last years, depending on how long I slept. In them, I answered to a different name, look different, have a different history, different hobbies, you get it. These dreams are so vivid and often so convincing that when I wake up from them, I'd be confused as to who I was before getting out of bed. I read that these kinds of dreams are also somewhat common, and that I shouldn't be too terribly spooked by them if they turned bad, which they eventually did. Some of these I can't even bring myself to talk about, they were so horrific. Others were less so, but emotionally devastating in other ways. I was once a man whose toddler was flattened by a minivan in front of him. A girl who was permanently disabled in an accident and could no longer play the sport she had dedicated herself to her entire life. After a while, I got used to these dreams too, and started to kind of look forward to them. When I was 16, both types of dreams were still occurring. I mostly had normal, run-of-the-mill dreams. These were rare in comparison. I stayed up for a while longer than usual one day, and when I dozed off, it was into one of the horrific dreams. In it, I was a girl in her late teens or early 20s who was wearing a really uncomfortable bra. The dream started with her riding in the back of a truck, making friendly small talk with a guy she didn't know very well as he drove, both lightly flirting. He took a wrong turn. She leaned forward and told him he was supposed to go straight. He replied, "I'm picking up a friend, remember? I thought I told you that." She was pretty sure he hadn't, but she didn't want to come off as a nut, so she ignored it. He kept driving further and further out into the country, and her gut kept protesting the situation. She kept wiping sweat off her hands, but there was nowhere for her to go if she got out of the vehicle. Fields for kilometers dotted with massive ranch homes too few and far apart to make it to, unless they stopped right beside one. They eventually pulled into the driveway of this gorgeous manor-like home, and they both got out of the truck. By this time, she was near puking from anxiety, and her legs were trembling up to her thighs. The guy was still plucky, and she tried to keep up an act, but it was glaringly obvious that something was off with her. The guy said nothing on it, and walked to the door with her and rang the bell. It was answered by an average height, average weight guy with orange freckles all over his face and chest, and short likewise hair. Butt naked, except for a towel around his waist and thighs. He looked a little startled at the arrival of girl and what's-his-face, but invited them inside, gave them drinks, and left them in his living room while he finished dressing. I don't remember the exact transition from waiting on the couch to the essentially endless assaults, but the rest of the dream was so insanely messed up that I don't want to and doubt I could write it down. If you can think of any not completely outrageous form of both assaults that could be performed by one or two assailants on a woman, it probably happened over that period of a little over a week in dream time. It was so vivid that when I woke up, I was shocked that I couldn't taste blood in my own mouth and that I was fine. And it took me much longer than usual to work my way back into my life. I didn't leave home that day, and when I was paying attention to my stride, I adopted a limp in my right leg. In the dream it had suffered, especially of the foot. I had the dream twice after the first time, not remembering it while in it. And my reaction to it wasn't any better with repeats. It was brutal. But I wrote it off as an especially appalling, horrific version of not me dreams. And I didn't brood over it for longer than it took to transition back to regular life. The third time, I told myself I would go to a sleep therapist if the dream happened again, and it didn't. About a year and a half after the last time I dreamt it, there was a big end-of-season party about 20 minutes out of town that a lot of people I knew were going to. I made plans, and on the evening of the party, I ended up in the backseat of a truck, driven by a friend of a friend I had met briefly a few times before and hung out once. He seemed to be pretty well liked and was a fun person to be around, so I didn't feel weird about being alone with him in his truck, though he insisted I sit in the back, tinted windows, because he didn't want cops pulling us over if they saw me and guessed that I was underage. We talked about fairly trivial things, and I kept adjusting a bra that I had outgrown but never tossed out. At this point, I was starting to feel strange, similar to the feeling you get when you know you're forgetting something as you leave your house, but you can't place what. I began to frown visibly, and even though he kept glancing at me in the back mirror to continue the conversation, and it was light enough out for him to see me, he didn't say anything. 5 minutes later, he took a wrong turn at the exact same bend in my dream. I was almost flattened by both déjà vu and panic at this, and it took me a moment to recover, lean forward, and say in a kind of pissy voice, "Hey, you were supposed to go straight back there." "I'm picking up a friend, remember? I thought I told you that." I practically peed myself in fear, and the pad of my right foot actually began to ache. I knew he hadn't told me he was going to pick up a friend, and I told him so, and he apologized and said he meant to, but must have forgotten. I would have gladly opened the door and flung myself out, but it was a 2-door truck and both doors were in the front. He kept talking, and I tried to contribute to the conversation. We drove further and further out, the houses growing larger and fewer, and I told myself that as soon as I saw a car, I would shoot forward, jerk the wheel hard to the right, and drive us into the ditch. I would say I saw a dog pass in front of the car and would break the back windows and crawl out. At the same time, I was trying to convince myself it was a coincidence and I was massively overreacting. No car passed us. We pulled into a driveway of a home which was gorgeous, but wasn't the same as in my dream. And as I got out of the car, I could hardly stand from the fear. We got out of the truck and the guy started toward the house, still chattering, and I told him I wanted to stay back because while we had been driving, I'd gotten carsick. I didn't think I could make it up the front steps. He chuckled and offered to carry me up. I refused and told him that I'd just puke up sushi on him if he tried, that I'd be up once my stomach settled. He seemed a little affronted, but rang the bell and went inside without me. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures of everything I conceivably could from my position. The door with the address number, a landscape in the front yard, which was beautiful, his truck, anything that could be used as a locator or identifier. I got on the house's Wi-Fi, no password, and posted everything to Facebook. I still have no idea what would have happened if his Wi-Fi had been locked. Acquaintance and his friend exit the house, but his friend is dressed rather than in a towel and has darker hair than I imagined in the dream. The freckles were there down to a T. I had no emotional or physical reaction. I'd transcended fear and passed into an almost disassociative state by now. I interrupted my friend as he invited me into the house, and I angled my phone toward them. It was closer to the foot of the stairs than before. I said, "Your house is amazing. I hope you don't mind that I posted pictures of it to my Facebook. You should get a professional photographer out here." Freckles' eyes went wide, and they went back inside with hardly a mumble in reply. My guy came back out alone, close to a half hour later, after I heard a muffled argument from somewhere inside. He hardly looked at me as he went down the steps, saying, "We're going, he's not coming." I got in the truck with him, sitting in the passenger seat, and we drove back to the main road. He didn't speak to me all the entire way back. He kicked me out on the road he had originally turned off of, and told me to get my own ride to the party. I called a taxi and was home within the hour. I still have no idea what I believe about this. I haven't had a premonition-like dream since that day, not even the cars at an intersection. Question file 1680. A dreamer's nightmares clash with reality. So first off, Jesus, what a story. I am my jaw has dropped, and I'm glad you had the presence of mind in a situation so freaking stressful to take pictures of the house and upload them, and yet you're lucky that you could use the Wi-Fi, since you had no signal. Truly brilliant thinking on your part. My guess is, these dreams you were having before, they weren't truly dreams. They were visions of either things that were going to happen in the future, but of you. Your subconscious simply altered it so you wouldn't think it was happening to you. Probably as a safeguard, because if you thought that these were going to happen to you, these tormented, demonic things, well, it would be very hard to function. So I think your subconscious was protecting you in that way. So giving you the warning as you would experience it in real time as it was happening, because it would match with your dreams. Like, was this happening to me? But you would only think that in the moment when it was going to happen. So at least you could still function for those years up to it. So I think your subconscious was as brilliant as your conscious mind in this case. Truly just wow. And it also explains why the details were shifted a bit. So it was a different universe's future. And in that universe, there were some differences, slightly different house, the man answered with clothes on. Didn't look exactly the same, stuff like that. But the details were close enough that it protected you. So, just incredible. That's all I can say. And now time for the quote of the day. Beth Halperin. We have the power to create anything, but we also have the responsibility to control what we create. That's the real challenge. From the movie The Sphere. What a great classic movie, classic sci-fi. Right alongside with The Abyss, but personally I think The Sphere is more philosophical, and that doesn't mean The Abyss is bad. What would you do if your own mind, your own thoughts, could create reality? It wouldn't be workable for most of us. I mean, not for me, because I can't control my own thoughts to that level. I can't control what enters my mind. I can control what I act on, but not what's up there swirling around in that chaos. My mind would be generating all kinds of crazy stuff, some things even evil, and there would be no way to block it. If we ever were gifted that kind of power, we would just have to say no. But would we be able to do that? It's the Ring of Power allegory in a certain sense. I think a lot of people would try to use it to disastrous ends. Like the video, subscribe, hit the bell. Kinetic Symphony signing off.